Oh, here we go. This is absolutely riveting, this webinar. I am really looking forward to it. Given that I got up at 5:30 a.m. this morning, and as Clive just mentioned, I do need a Red Bull to keep myself awake. But I don't need that because I've got you, our amazing audience, who are here to listen all about the right ingredients. So it's a cooking themed webinar. It's an unbelievable webinar. It's all about picking the low-hanging fruit webinar, all the food terminology. And we're going to talk about crafting your perfect participant experience. What are the different ingredients that you need when it comes to measurement and data? I know sometimes that can be a boring topic for a lot of people, but for us, it's exciting because we can change in real time how participants experience your show by understanding what they're thinking, what they're feeling, and all of that comes back to data. Now, I'm sure you're wondering, we had a last minute replacement and we don't have Chloe Richardson on. We have Clive, who is the Don when it comes to measurement and data. He is the COO at Explori. And he is got some amazing insights. We've had a pre-call and you're going to love some of the truth bombs that he'll be delivering later on. And we also have the amazing Ade Allenby from Allenby Consulting, who's developed his own methodology for you around events and data. And it's going to be premiered for the first time in the world on this webinar. So it's going to be great. So welcome to my two amazing panelists. And I just want to start with a bit of preamble and say that, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit out there. I'm going to keep going with the cooking metaphors. There's a lot of low-hanging fruit there for event organizers. The data's already there. We just need to tap into it and do something really useful with it, something beneficial. And that's why my two panelists are here today. So my first question is going to be to Clive. Clive, I'm going to start off where, right at the very beginning of this topic. And I want to know all about, event data. And, why is event data important? Is it important? Should we be caring about it? And what are the different ways we should be using to, get data on our audiences, on our attendees, on our sponsors, on exhibitors? Give us a bit of a rundown, a flavor, if you will.
Thank you. I think it's about 4 questions there, Hugh, but I will
Sorry, I know
try
you have
my
three, of course.
best
Yeah, I'm just
to.
going to ask one, and I'm
Yeah,
just
no,
going
it's
to
all
load
good.
loads in.
It's all
You can
good.
just go for the whole webinar if you want, just this
Why
one
not?
question.
Why not? And look, yeah, apologies that I'm not Chloe, but we are both from the north of England, so hopefully the similar accent will carry us through the next hour. But to answer Hugh's questions, event data is crucially important, but also, as I'm sure most of you viewing this webinar will attest to, there is lots and lots and lots of it. So really the art is understanding what are the most relevant data points for you to refer to look at, to analyze, to do something with. It all really comes back to what is the objectives of your event? What are you actually looking to achieve through running a given event? And from that, you can then determine what are the key data points for you. And there's often quite a lot of data that gets overlooked. So even like something like the humble registration form, you're not just asking in there for their contact details and where to email the pass to and all that sort of stuff. You'll typically have other data in there as well, which is going to be really useful to understand actually have you brought the right types of buyer or visitor, and even in the case of exhibitors to the event as well. You'll be collecting lots of data on site, be that scan data, data you're collecting through your mobile app. Again, if you link all those data points back to what do we want to get from this event? What does a good experience look like for our visitors and exhibitors? Then it can really inform which of those data points you use. And then I sit here as the CEO of Explori. I can see on the webinar today, there's some of our clients on the call as well. And as you'll know, we are first and foremost a survey platform and a research agency. And clearly the survey data is a key element of this as well. So understanding actually, did your visitors have a good experience? Will they come back next time? What can you do to improve things for a future iteration? And getting similar from your exhibitors as well. So really, the long and the short of it is you will have lots of data. You may be overwhelmed with the data that you have available to you, but always bring it back to what are we looking to achieve? What are the objectives of the event? and what can we learn to make a better event next time?
Yeah, I think that's so important in today's age where, I've spoken to lots of different event organizers and they segment all their audiences and each audience has a different objective. And it's like, well, if you're just going broad brush, there's so many tools and so many different ways where you can actually put them into different buckets. I know Gina from Mash Media does that. She does that very well. She's been on a previous webinar talking about that. So understanding their objectives, working back from that. Brilliant. Now, Ade. You've been to Russia recently, haven't you? You've gone and created a Moscow framework
That's
for
right.
our
I
participants
have
on this webinar.
I have bent the Moscow rules product scoping framework to my will. So please, no product managers get in touch with me to say that's not how you meant to use it. But I thought it was a good way of showing what kind of data we can use and where we might be up to. So if I can just share my screen, the live premiere of this is coming now. And this is the great Pema Chodron who spoke the wise words, start where you are. And her wise words have got me through many a tough time. But it's absolutely what we need to think about in terms of data, because it's easy to think we've got lots of data and then think, I don't know where to start and not bother or feel like we're starting in the wrong place. So what I thought we'd look at, the way we look at it is to say there's some data which you just almost have to have by default because you've got a website and a reg platform and you've got a marketing platform. Then there's things that you should have, those are the things that most events will then try and add to that picture. Then there's the could haves, which are maybe then additional things which you can add, those simpler, cheaper enhancements. And then the would have is what I'd really like to have to switch the lights on. What are the things that are really going to tell me more about customers? And those might be more complex things, but potentially bigger wins. And so where we are in this particular framework is dependent on your data maturity, and that will depend on the size of show, whether you're part of a bigger organizer, your attitude to risk and innovation. Do you want to try out new stuff? The maturity of the digital tools you've got, how long have you been using them, and are they well embedded into your show? And therefore, are you getting good adoption with them? And are you able to collect the right sort of data at scale? And then, just generally, you've got an attitude which is using metrics beyond normal metrics to measure things like engagement with those platforms. So this is the must-haves. As you can appreciate, those you're going to have marketing performance data, web analytics, registration data, declared interest. What are the registrants saying that they're interested in? And then verification data, because you then know who attended at site, so you knew what they consumed in terms of marketing, what they said they were going to do, and then whether they actually thought it valuable enough to turn up to your show. The should haves, you start to then customize and segment your data. You deploy an event platform, an event app, which helps your visitors to engage, your exhibitors to engage. You have lead scan, you have session data and survey data to complete that picture. Then you start to add, you go deeper into the platform, the intent. So are people favoriting stuff in the platform? Are they arranging meetings? Are they making connections? Do you have the ability, as well as for exhibitors to scan, for the visitors to collect information digitally from exhibitors? That's going to give you an even bigger data set. Do you have session dwell time as well as session entry time, which is going to complete the picture on that? Do you have band data around your purchase intent, so the budget authority need timescale that you can potentially capture at registration or at other parts in that engagement process? And then lead scoring. So are you able to add to the picture of just capturing a lead by understanding the engagement with different products and exhibitors for those visitors. And then finally, the would-haves are the more granular level information. So behavioral intent, you know what you understand what customers said they were going to do, but does their activity on the digital platform and the digital signals on the show floor agree with that? The show floor analytics through device tracking and smart badging, the person level attendance. So did you know actually this person attended something, sentiment analysis, and building all of this into personas that are going to help guide your sales, your marketing, and the experience you're trying to design. I'll wait for comment there.
I mean, it's blown me away. The Moscow method. I just love the fact that you've created the acronym Moscow, and it fits perfectly. I've got one question for you, Ade, which is, could the participants on this webinar have these slides at the end? And could they then maybe replace your logo with their own company and present it to their board and say, this is what we need to be doing with data?
Yes, absolutely. And I totally expect that we could argue that some of these will move around. So maybe for some shows, some of these aren't worthwhile. And that's the point. The point is you know where you're up to, and it creates the awareness that you can do stuff with the data that you've got, and you can have a direction of travel to the data which is going to then help you uncover more insights.
So I think this is a good point, and Clive, I know you've got a view on this, which is, if I was an event organizer, I see all this stuff, I would be a bit scared right now. But you said earlier that actually you could just look at this and go, what am I doing today? What are the things that I'm doing? And then lean into that a little bit more. Because everyone's doing something on this list. You don't have to go, oh, how do I do it all?
Yeah.
Actually, just look at where you are today. I think that was a really good point that you made, Ade.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing I'd add to what Ade has outlined there is, yes, this will look different for every different event, and Ade alluded to that, but also there's an element of which of these things do you really want to do properly? Now, that might sound like a strange thing for me to say, but there's an element with all of these where you can do it with a bit of lip service, where, yeah, we've got the top line stats on this, or we've just done the bare minimum to get this information. Or you can lean into it and do it properly and get the real detailed analysis and data from it. Survey data is a good example of that. We still see, unfortunately, too many surveys that are a bit of an afterthought. You send it out, you get back what you get, and it's not really used in any strategic way. It's not linking back to objectives. For survey data and some of the other points in here as well, to get your personas right, to get your sentiment analysis right, it's about actually investing the time and focusing on a few of these points that are particularly important to the health of the event.
So which ones would we say, what events are doing which of these well? Are there any concrete examples that you could call out, Ade or even Clive, of who's doing some of these things and doing them well? Because I think our audience loves those interesting examples in real life.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I worked on whilst I was at RX was developing a new product to engage visitors with exhibitors and using a North Star metric framework. And that was about understanding what is the path to delivery. So and then understanding the capturing the data and the metrics along the way. So then, because there's a sales fulfillment process, there's a marketing process, and there's an outcome, a measurement of success. And if you line all those up and try and combine elements of that, so you've got one metric that you can say, if that's increasing, we are doing those underlying things well. And so we developed that product. We could then zoom in and see which part of the process wasn't performing, and then help the show team to improve and review that for the next show.
And Clive, what about you? I mean, obviously your world is surveys. What shows are doing them really well, and how are they doing them well?
Yeah, so we work with events who do it really well when we use a term called closing the loop. So this is when you're actually collecting the data and then playing it back to your individual participants. So I can think of particularly some in the association space who do this really well, where let's say it's an exhibitor survey and they're seeing in the exhibitor survey there's some exhibitors there who are indicating they didn't have a good experience and potentially they're not looking to return next time. And in addition to that, they're looking at the other data points like the app analytics and seeing actually where they're using all the tools that were made available to them, what were their lead scans like, all that sort of stuff, and using that to actually play it back to the individual exhibitor and go, look, we see in the survey that you didn't have a good experience with X, Y, and Z. You're not thinking of returning. This could have been better. Let us help you. Let us do something for you differently next time. And that is so, so powerful. I think the biggest critique most people have when it comes to giving their data, be it in a survey or be it elsewhere, is where has that data gone? Is anyone even doing anything with this? Are they reading my response? Are they acting on the information that I've been giving them? And just that behavior of following up with someone, acknowledging where they haven't used a tool optimally or they have expressed dissatisfaction and potentially a likelihood to churn from an event is so, so powerful. It has a number of effects. It means that you are potentially turning someone around who was likely to not be participating in a future year. So there's a big revenue impact there of that data piece. But also there's the halo effect as well, to go back to the point I just made. It is such a frustration of folk, and I'm sure everyone on this webinar can relate to it, of why did I give them this information? What are they doing with it? Do they even care what I say? And just that, oh my God, someone's read this and they're doing something with it and they're following up with me is such a powerful thing. So as I say, I see it more in my work in the association, not-for-profit space. I think it's something commercial organisers can be much better at as well. So for those of you on this webinar from that space, it's a challenge I'd put up to you to maybe in future use that more on a micro level and get back to your audience when they're giving you this information.
Well, I think that's really interesting about what do you actually do with the data. So, Clive, you gave me a good example before around detractors. You get an NPS score,
Yep.
detractors. You were saying, you know, some show organizers are just picking up the phone.
So simple, so simple. And why would you not? If you've got an exhibitor with a 5-figure, 6-figure spend at your event and they're a detractor, and any survey worth its salt would have a question to understand, well, why are you a detractor? What are the reasons why you're given the score you are? And an exhibitor who is a detractor, trust me, they will want to tell you in that survey why they haven't had the best experience and why they're not likely to advocate for that show. That information is gold dust. Why would you not pass that to an account manager to follow up with them, have a discussion to see what went wrong, and basically just to try and smooth things out? And for the cost of running that survey, your ROI on that can be many times over, because if you do prevent that company from churning, it's invaluable. And as I say, it's such a simple activity, and so few organizers we see actually do that at the moment. And it doesn't just need to be survey data. As I say, it could be if you have participants who are investing in the tools that you're using, but they're not really using them and they're not using them optimally. Come back to them and say, look, we see that you have downloaded this or you've registered for that and you're not using it fully. Here's some tips for how to do it. It's just really making sure that you are providing that kind of one-on-one care and one-on-one response to your participants.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, that's all the attendee experience. That's what this webinar is about, crafting that great experience, whether it's for your exhibitors or the participants, the actual attendees themselves. Ade, talking about data, we can have too much data, can't we? We've all filled in a reg form, and I see registration data as in you must have, and it's pages upon pages of drop downs. What's going on there? I mean, these large organizers, maybe middle-sized organizers, maybe it happens to small organizers as well. Are they just copy and pasting the same form, and stakeholders are kind of all lumping new questions in every year? It's just becoming bloated. What's really going on with this really bad experience for participants with registration data?
Yeah, I think it's a it's an organic process, isn't it? You start out with a registration form and you then start adding to it because often you want to have marketing proof points about the audience attending. But I think it boils down to, do you trust declared interests? Do you and is your form so long that people are getting form fatigue and they don't see any payback? And two ways I think you can address that. One is to make it clear that the data is used in actually crafting the experience, but also can you give some additional payback so that by capturing that data, once you finish the registration form, you've actually got some kind of agenda or some kind of schedule that's saying, here's the things you told us you liked. Here's some examples of things you might want to see at the show, and that not only gives value to the visitor, but it potentially then starts that planning and connection process with exhibitors.
I mean, that's totally great, isn't it, really? It's personalization, which is what everyone wants to achieve. And I think we're getting there now with the amount of data we're collecting on people and, the AI tools that we can bring in there.
Can I just add,
Clive, you probably, sorry, go on, Clive.
Yeah, can I just add to what Ade's saying, which is on a related point, which is something we see all the time, is you've got that registration form, which to your point, Ade, is often getting longer and longer and more things get added and added to it. In one respect, that's fine, but then what you see is the same questions then being added when people are registering for the app. The same questions are then being added in the survey. So people are given the same information 3, 4, 5 times. There is absolutely no need to do that. It's 2025. If you've got that data in one place, any tool, any platform worth its salt will merge that data together for you. So another call to arms, I would say, from this webinar today is ask something once and don't ask it again, because it is very easy to get that data from registration, append it to lead scan data, to survey data, to whatever it might be. And honestly, you will make the participant experience so much better doing that, and it will make your analysis so much richer as well, because the last thing anyone wants to do is fill out the same information 5, 10 times. And if they do, honestly, they're going to get so pissed off by having to do it that, again, it's really not reflecting your brand in a positive way.
So technically, how do you actually do that, Ade? How, what tools are people using to make sure all these things interconnect?
So there's a good example from my work at RX where I oversaw a project to look into buyer behaviors, visitor behaviors. Why do people come to the event? What do they intend to do at the event? How do they get value out of it? And we did a global survey across different countries and different events, and came up with 7 different behaviors that people exhibited. But it's all the sort of things that you normally have in your reasons to attend, because, are people coming for knowledge and content? Are they coming for discovery? Are they coming to reconnect with suppliers? All of those things. And if you survey that to start with, you've got an idea of what people intend to do. And then you've got data at the show, which is telling you what they actually did and what they actually engaged with. And then you can even align that with survey data, which says, were you satisfied that you reached that goal? Were you satisfied in the experience you had? And that is how you help craft the experience for your show, because you're saying, well, we're definitely not delivering on this discovery piece. So is our website working hard enough? Is our navigation at the event working? And you can look into what experiences that's going to help you deliver.
And so talking about experiences, we've got stuff like location tracking. So we've got someone in the questions that from the participants of this webinar who asked a question, which was, how do you use indoor positioning to collect really great insights on people? I know, Ade, you did some research on this at RX, didn't you? But before I get you to answer, I am just going to share a message from our sponsor. And that sponsor, again, as always, is Grip. It's us. And the sponsor wants to say, our next webinar is coming up. So if you want to join, that would be fantastic. It's all about Beyond the Hype, how AI assistants are transforming event ROI. So it's all about the new wave of AI systems. Forget chatbots that are generic and not useful. Think about LLM-powered AI assistants that can help your participants improve their experience. Right, while that's on screen and you're all scanning it and registering, Abe, tell me about location data, because this is really interesting and a lot of organizers are using it now. How's that being used to craft the participant experience?
One of the big benefits of having data at that scale is that you're not relying on you're not relying on the data from a specific tool. So if you look at lead scanning can be really useful in understanding who's engaging, which exhibitors are performing. But with location-based data, you've got a view across the whole show floor, not just those exhibitors that are using lead scanning. And what this enables you to do with enough coverage, you can actually see where which exhibitors are over-indexing. They're kind of knocking it out the park compared to stands of a similar size or their neighbours, and those that are underperforming. And that means you can help those exhibitors course correct. And this data can be made available within hours. So within the lifetime of the show, on beginning of day 2, you can have data on day 1, and that can inform how you're going about helping your exhibitors. And if you think about it, and I've seen this happen. If you go along to a new exhibitor or smaller exhibitor who's had a tough time on day 1, but you give them some ideas because you know which stands around them are performing better, you could potentially help them along. Maybe help them put a social post out or send a notification through the app and help them in that second day. Those guys are really going to notice a difference to their experience and what they got from exhibiting, and that's going to go from a potential churn to a retained customer.
Yeah, it's a great example. And were you saying that it's being used at some shows that you've worked at? I like the idea of saying, badge scans are another way of getting location data, because you can also use smart badges, can't you? So I think we've seen people like HumanX, the AI show in Vegas. They use smart badges to see whether connections are being made, and then can intelligently change different things, different activations on the show floor in real time based on how busy or not busy things are.
Yes, I mean,
Is it IFA Berlin? You said that were they using data on?
yes. So I'm working with Clarion at the moment, helping them in the way that they generate data and use data, helping them with looking at AI use cases. So I was at IFA weekend before last. They deployed Crowd Connected with Grip to turn on the lights in terms of the show. And the thing about IFA Berlin is that they have lots of stuff going on around the show, which are sponsored events and activations. It's really important to be able to see that those are driving extra traffic and dwell time, which is possible through this. Another point to mention, you said about lead scanning, and we talked about visitor-led content capture and visitor-led lead capture. Those are active signals of somebody saying, I want to know more about this exhibitor. I want to follow up with this exhibitor salesperson, or a networking contact. And that's a positive signal about intent and interest in that product. And so there are passive signals which are looking at where people are going, and that's good at an aggregate level, because you can see these stands have overperformed on the amount of dwell time. They've got people are sticking around at these stands. But if that's combined with, and also you're getting those active signals, then you've got a really great picture.
Because I mean, that's another question that's come in that blows my mind a bit. We've got all this data coming. How do you stitch it all together to know what to do? I mean, it's probably coming at you from all angles. All these disparate data sets. You've got behavioral data, you've got this, badge scan data, you've got your reg data. How do you pull it all in to know what to do? Is there not an element of just analysis paralysis where you're like, oh, I don't know what to do?
Yeah, I think it does come back to focusing in on the KPIs that are going to tell you when you've had success relative to your strategy. So if you're trying to drive more meetings, then what data have you got about people who favorited stuff in the app? What products have they said they're interested in? What products have they then collected at the event? So and has that turned into actual meetings? Have people actively engaged with that? But in terms of the data collection process, I've done a lot of work with Allenby Advisory with different clients, and leveraging Adam Price, a growth architect who's an expert in CRM, and bringing together the process of walking through with the client where the data is coming from for that target customer, where is it coming in, and what do you want to do with it whilst it's in that process. And I know it's possible to put the event success platform at the center of that. It's maybe another point of truth, but ultimately you need to know that wherever your record exists of the customer, as things happen, how are you recording those things, though, who they've become a lead for, which exhibitors they've engaged with.
Well, I see you nodding away there. What would you chip in?
I agree fully with Ade on that point. There is an overwhelming amount of data, but it always has to come back to what are your objectives for this event. Ade gave some perfectly, excellent examples there around growing the number of meetings, getting exhibitor satisfaction up. It could be successfully launching a new part of the event, could be getting more engagement with the app. You need to be determining this months, if not years, before the event has started. Because otherwise, what you'll do is if you don't have those clearly thought out goals and objectives, that's when the data paralysis sets in, because you'll have all the data afterwards and it's like, well, what should I be looking at here? And then you start going down all these different rabbit holes and you're looking at all these different data points and nothing does join up because you haven't got at the top of your mind, this is what we want to be achieving here. So I said it in my first response at the start, and Ade put it very eloquently then as well. It all comes back to what are you trying to achieve? If you're clear on that, then what you should be measuring afterwards should come neatly from it.
But is that easier said than done? Because I'm just thinking, there's a lot of stakeholders, like senior leaders in a business, and they all want, I want this question or I want this data. At what point, how do you get the skills or the kind of argument to stand up and go, you're wrong, leader XYZ. We only need to collect the metrics that matter, which is what you said, Clive, in the pre-chat. How do you get that argument together to go and argue to say you can't keep putting in extra questions every year because the registration becomes crazy long? Ade, I saw your hand up.
One of the questions that came up before the webinar was about long purchase cycles, and what do you do when there's long purchase cycles in the industry? I was thinking about it, and it's basically just an extended version of a normal buying cycle. So, and I think this is a good way to frame what you are measuring and what your KPIs are, because if you think about, some people are coming because they don't even know what their problem is. So that, it's problem recognition stage, and that's where content comes in, and that's where peer talks, peers talking about how they've used products. And then it's looking for solutions, and then it's kind of validating that with which suppliers you want to engage with. And so how are you creating that experience for them? How are you enabling them to find those those experiences along the way, so that whether it's attending sessions, having one-to-one demos, having deeper level conversations, speaking to other peers, you are putting in the metrics that's saying this is how we know they're engaging along that funnel, and we're nudging them along. We all know sometimes we'll attend a show and then the next time we think, oh, last year I was looking at this. So and you're going through a year cycle and you kind of thinking, right, I've moved along because now I'm a step further on.
Clive, I see your hand up there.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, your question was, you've got all these different stakeholders and they all have all these different demands for data points. One of the first things we do at Explori when we start with a new client is actually get all these stakeholders in a room, because often what happens is you're getting all these requests in on email, or water cooler chats in parts of the office going, oh, we really need to measure this, and can you collect that, and so senior manager really wants to see this. The first thing we always do with any new client is to get those stakeholders in a room and to really understand what data you're already collecting, which of these are really important, and we challenge that and challenge that and challenge that. Is it really important? Do you really need to ask these 3 questions in registration, or add this series of 5 questions in a survey? What are you going to do with it? And again, it always comes back to that question, what are you going to do with it? Is this just a vanity metric to go, aren't we great? Or is it actually something where you're going to be able to do something with it afterwards? And honestly, that meeting is the critical point as to how successfully a client onboards with Explori, because if we can get everyone in the room, we can really unpick what is absolutely vital and what is not. And then from there, we understand what the key metrics are. We can build them into surveys. They maybe go away and change what they do in registration and that sort of thing. That knits it all together. So it is as simple, there was a question raised about AI. It's a very non-digital way of doing things, but it's still very effective. Get everyone in a room, an hour and a half, very clearly coming back to what is fundamental and what you're going to do with the data you get from it. When you bring everything back to those 2 points, you will then start to basically get to the real core data points that you need for that event.
So how difficult are those meetings? In terms of percentage, how often do the senior leadership roll over and go, oh yeah, I don't really need that question. I just thought I'd ask it because I'm interested.
More often than not, they are successful, because when you ask the question, what are you going to do with it? That's when you start to get the, yeah, but well, it wouldn't be, and that's when it always seems to fall over. So once you've done that a couple of times in one of those sessions, I think the senior stakeholders go, okay, these guys have got a point here. And the other thing it brings back to is the participant experience. All these data points are points that your audience are giving you through one form or another. Do you really want to put your valued visitors and exhibitors through all these different ways of giving you data, or do you want to make it as streamlined and simple as possible? So the combination of those 2 points, think about the person who's giving you this data, and then secondly, what are you actually going to do with it once you've got it? Blend those 2 together, and that's the secret sauce. And that's my first food pun 38 minutes into it. So you're
Yes,
welcome.
we've got a winner. Fantastic.
Um,
Right, I'm going into questions. We've got some really good ones. We've got one from Bogdan. Always trust Bogdan to come with the killer questions. He says, I'm going to come to you, Ade, first with this one. With AI becoming more accessible, how do we avoid the garbage in, garbage out problem when most event data is still fragmented across registration systems, apps, badge scanners, and social media? Ade, over to you.
I think it goes back to what we were saying before, in that you're mapping out your data flow, and then you're matching that to the tech stack that's going to deliver it. The challenge that a lot of smaller organizers have is that their tech stack has evolved based on needs at a particular point in time and budget constraints, which means you've bolted something onto what you've already got. And to be able to take a step back and say, actually, if we had data flowing through here, we could automate processes, we could have data flowing through, and it will justify the spend in the platforms and in that change piece. Larger organizers often they are limited because they've already had the platforms chosen for them, but can often benefit from the fact that that data should flow through. Um, but I think, there's always the challenge of bringing in new platforms and what you do with that data and how you integrate that. And that's why data integrations are really key. And I guess why GRIP it's a big thing that you guys focus on too.
Clive, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question Bogdan asks, because again, we do see a lot of this as well, that you just throw everything at AI and see what you get back afterwards. And usually it's something which is not fit for purpose at all. And I think where AI does play a really good role here is, I know there's a number of suppliers that the AI is very specific to a need. So at Explori, for example, there's a lot, we get tens of thousands of comments every week from people who are answering surveys around event improvements. How would you improve an event? Or after the NPS question, why are they giving that score? The AI we've incorporated here is very specific just to those use cases. So we've trained the model so that responses are categorized to a code frame that really speaks to the events industry, rather than if you were to put all those comments into a generic AI tool. Again, it would get some of the way there, but it wouldn't be quite right. So I think, to Bogdan's point, it is really trying to understand what is it you want to do when you're putting all this data together. Again, back to, we're going to get very bored of hearing us say this, going back to what are your objectives of it, and then what are the tools there that are specific to that use case. So the example there with the verbatim analysis that we have at Explore, but I know there's many other tools in the industry as well that serve a specific purpose, and the AI is there just to speed that up and make it a lot more simple and effective for users.
Fantastic. Right, moving from AI to exhibitors. So we got a question from one of our participants who said, how would you approach an exhibitor who hasn't done much work? So haven't completed their task probably, haven't uploaded their profile, haven't really done what they need to do to be successful. Another word for that is lazy. So haven't done much work and subsequently hasn't achieved great results from exhibiting, despite our efforts to get them involved and engaged in the marketing for that event and their promotion and everything else that goes along with, making the most of them being there. So question to you, Clive. What should they do in that instance when it comes to data?
Lazy exhibitors, do they exist? I thought they were all really. I'd like, if it's okay, just to put something on the screen, which for those of you on the webinar who have used Explore before will have seen. So this is a matrix we put together, which looks at satisfaction and loyalty. And the exhibitors that he's describing in that description, or the question that came in, really fits into this category in the top left, the hostages, and you will all know them on this call. They are the guys who turn up every year, do bugger all, moan about it, but they will still come back next year. The question I would pose to organisers, and we are increasingly working with organisers who are doing this, is to go, well, do you want these guys at your event ultimately? And the reason I say that is, what we are seeing more and more in the visitor data we're collecting in surveys is that it is such a turn off for visitors to have those exhibitors who have come, who have not prepared, who have not, to your point, who completed their profile. They go to the stand and they're surly and they're not prepared and they just haven't done the basics right for a good experience. So yes, in the short term, there is a revenue point there in terms of not encouraging these exhibitors to return. But for the longer term strategic health of your event, you do have to ask yourself the question, are these the exhibitors we want at our event? Because yes, there's a revenue aspect to them, but there's also a visitor impact as well. And the more of those hostages you have, there's a strong correlation then with the visitor perceptions of your show.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And Ade, you were talking about not naming and shaming previously, but you were like talking about lookalike audiences, weren't you? And how you can show an exhibitor like them who did do the relevant actions.
Yeah, and I've done some work with Clarion on how you can create an exhibitor dashboard, which is then uses the averages across different engagement points to highlight what they're missing out on. So, you're giving the exhibitor FOMO because you're saying, oh yeah, these exhibitors ended up with 15 meetings before the event even started, and that's de-risking your event. So you engage in that way. Uh, um, then you can point out, actual tactics on the show floor, but the point being that with the right data, you can show for your size of stand, here's the levels of engagement that other exhibitors were getting because they were deploying these techniques to engage with the audience and and with those kind of marketing upsells, the promotions that the organizer can help the exhibitor with. So we can drive traffic, but you may need to evolve your engagement tactics as well.
Yeah, a bit of behavioral psychology there. It works with toddlers and it also works with exhibitors and sponsors. Fantastic. Right, we've got only a couple of minutes left, so I just want to ask one more question around post-show. Okay, so you finished your event, it's happened, you've got a ton of this data. What do you do with it? One of our participants on the webinar said about, how do you track the ROI post-event? And it's also things that maybe you can't get the data on, or maybe you can, you tell me. So has the event brought any value to an industry? So have there been more deals that have been completed as a result? Has there been more M&A done? How do we track a lot of this stuff after the show? And then what do we do with this data to improve the next show? Clive, I'm going to ask you first. I know you're big in the world of post-event.
Yeah, so I'll talk specifically to the wider impact of the event. We work with a number of event brands. Good examples would be the Roots events that are held by Informa, but also IMEX as well, who a lot of what they're looking to do with the event is bring economic activity to the host cities. So actually, a lot of the focus of their post-event reporting is, with our help and structuring the right survey questions around this, is to understand what is the impact, let's say, on Frankfurt of IMEX hosting the event there? How many extra hotel nights have there been? What's been the spend in the local area? This is really going above and beyond this is what this has achieved through our visitors and exhibitors, but also what's it achieved more broadly. So when you ask what's the impact of the industry, obviously Amex is a huge brand in the MICE industry, the hugest one might argue, and therefore this is really just showing a one way of them being able to show the impact that's had on the local industry. And as I say, there are other event brands who do similar things as well. And again, it's all about going back to what do you want those bigger impacts to be, and therefore how can you structure the questions and the metrics to be able to answer them effectively.
Yeah, like you were saying, it's almost a year, 2 years in advance. If you come up with what do you want the wins to be for
Yeah.
your participants, then you can track that a couple of years later when you end up with a few shows under your belt. Ade, what should people do post events when it comes to data and changing experience?
I think from a visitor perspective, you've got the opportunity to look at then what was the makeup of your event and how are you segmenting it in terms of whether it's product interests or the value that visitors are trying to get out the show to then understand how do we need to improve that experience? What are we actually delivering on? And that can then impact your marketing going forward. It can your targeting, your messaging. From an exhibitor perspective, I think it's really important to help them help themselves and follow up the leads. So how can you help them prioritize leads? How can you remind them to follow the leads up? Because often it's left down to individual salespeople that might think they've got a bunch of business cards and that's enough for them. So how can you encourage, and you've often in touch with the marketing contact, so you're giving them the data to say, these are the leads that you should be following up.
Fantastic. I'm trying to think of a cooking pun to end this one on. hope you both have excellent days. But if you really want an excellent webinar experience, even better than this one, it can't be better than this one. This one's amazing. Please do scan the QR code, come to the next one about AI assistants. While you're all doing that, I'm going to ask our amazing panelists how you can catch up with them. So Ade, how can people get in touch with you and rip off your slide designs?
So my website's allenbyadvisory.com, and I am on LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest way to get in touch.
And if you want his Moscow slides, just email him. Get him through LinkedIn. He'll give them to you. Clive, how can people get in touch with you?
I haven't got any Moscow slides, I'm afraid, and I could never beat what Ade's put together for this. But Explori.com, if you are interested in finding out more about the work that we do there, and also on LinkedIn as well, where you will see the picture that was shown at the start, which unfortunately was quite a few years ago now. So the bit more facial hair and a bit more bags under the eyes compared to that.
Don't worry, next time we'll get Nano Banana on the case and we'll all be 10 out of 10. Chef's kiss, in fact. So thank you very much for my amazing panelists, and thank you to the audience who are equally as amazing. I think we've all learned something about cooking metaphors and data and how events can be transformed with that measurement and data. So thank you very much, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thanks, you. Thanks, Clive.
Cheers. Thanks.
Bye-bye. Cheers.